Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Hopefully we'll get some people here shortly. Getting this set up in a coffee mug, which was the way I was hearing one should do this. We are live. All right, well, no one's here yet, but I'll start talking because eventually this will be replayed, and when it replays, it doesn't matter if anybody's here. Tonight, I'm John Aravosis. I'm the editor of America Blog, one of the most important, I would argue, strongest progressive political blogs in the U.S. And I'm doing a daily election analysis between now and the election. And today's topics are going to be Donald Trump's medical record. The second topic is going to be Wikileaks outing a gay person and a number of other really horrible things today. And the final topic will be about a new hack dealing with the Russians of the New York Times. So the first topic I wanted to talk about was Donald Trump's medical record. This is getting actually really interesting. You might remember if you were watching the news the last few days, and also I wrote about it on my blog, that Donald Trump's surrogates, but also his campaign staff and Trump himself have been suggesting that Hillary has health issues. Katrina Pearson, who's the crazy one, the woman who said that Obama invaded Afghanistan in 2001, Katrina had said that, she said that Hillary has dysphagia, which is some kind of a brain disease. Then you had, we have music outside tonight. Okay, well, in the background you get to hear music in the little bandstand below me by the water. Then you had another of Donald Trump himself saying that Hillary was had a problem with stamina. And he kept referring to it. He mentioned something about her mind, too. I forgot what it was. But he just kept talking about her stamina and how she kept sleeping and she kept taking vacations, trying to suggest that there was a problem with her. Then it gets even worse when today on CNN, one of Trump's surrogates, and just to remind you, surrogate is a term we use in politics, meaning people the campaign have out there talking, doing their bidding, talking to the media, doing events with followers, but they don't officially work for the campaign. But they still speak for the campaign, but it allows the campaign to basically have somebody go out there and say something crazy, and the campaign can then say, we weren't responsible. But had their surrogate, a Republican congressman on CNN today, and he wouldn't quit. He was talking about Hillary coughs, And I was like, okay, she'll give speeches and then she'll stop and cough. And it's Brianna Keeler, that's her name, the woman on CNN, one of the hosts, who's been amazing. Brianna's the one who did the infamous, the campaign's not doing so well. What do you mean? Well, the polls are really bad. What polls? All of them? That's Brianna Keeler, who's just amazing. So Brianna has got this Republican congressman on, and he's pulling the same BS with her about, Hillary coughs, and she tripped once or twice. There are videos. Brianna basically just let him have it, which was great. There was one, I pulled up the video, and I'm going to see if I can play it on my iPad, and if you guys can actually hear it. If so, that would be really cool, but we'll see. Hold on, if not, I put it in the Facebook feed, and it's on my blog, but listen to this, just a quick, 2 or 3 seconds of the guy was spouting off about Hillary coughing, so then he started talking about, but Mr. Trump is incredibly healthy, and that's when Brianna finally, kicks it and stops him, so hold on.
You have nothing on the Trump side that would lead you to believe that he is nothing but healthy. There's been things with
there's nothing that would lead you to believe he is healthy, Congressman. His letter from his doctor is borderline ridiculous when you talk to other doctors who look at it.
I don't know. Could you guys hear that? Just if you could give me a quick message there and mention it. But basically, he said, there's nothing to suggest that Mr. Trump would have is anything but healthy. And she said, well, actually, there's nothing to suggest that he is healthy. The letter from his doctor is borderline ridiculous. CNN today, God bless them, and I mean this, has been having, good, well, Wanda says you guys could hear it, perfect. CNN today has been having a field day with Donald Trump's health. And the reason is, again, God bless them, but they took the Trump's campaign's bait. And the CNN all day has been saying, fine, you want to talk about the candidate's health, let's talk about the candidate's health. They've had their doctor, Sanjay Gupta, come on, and they had him talk about Hillary's health. And, she had a concussion a few years ago. She had 2 different kind of clots, you mentioned, so she's on blood thinning medication. But otherwise, we've got a long medical record here. The doctors say she's fine, no reason to believe she isn't. Then there's Donald Trump. Well, all we've got is a letter from his doctor. And Gupta, I'm going to pull up this letter just as we're talking, because I had looked at it initially and thought it was nuts, but after Gupta went through it today, And the best part is CNN keeps replaying the Sanjay Gupta interview and interview again. They basically are going nonstop all day talking about Donald Trump's health and how there's no evidence that he's healthy. And it's basically fair play. The Trump people wanted to talk about health. We're talking about health. So Gupta goes through this letter and basically says, and I want to pull up my little note I had here of what Gupta had said. It's a strange letter that's absurd to look at face value. And he starts going through the letter and he says, okay, first of all, the doctor says the test results were astonishingly excellent. He said, well, no doctor would say that. He said, there's a lot of things that no doctor would say. He says Trump's PSA test score. PSA is the test that they do for prostate cancer, right? So to speak, that's the test. He says, Gupta says, it mentions the PSA test score. He goes, we don't call it a test score. I mean, it's a result or something, but he goes, this isn't the SATs. That was Gupta's own quote. He goes, no doctor calls it a test score. Then he goes on to the best part, which Gupta pulled out. He said, later on, it says, Mr. Trump has had, this is the letter from Trump's doctor, Mr. Trump has had a recent complete medical examination that showed only positive results. Gupta points out and says, only positive results means every single test showed that he had a problem. He said in medicine, a negative result is what you want. Positive result means we found something. And again, he says, no doctor would write a letter like this. So I'm asking who wrote the letter? Well, then I was seeing a follow-up report. First of all, Trump refers to his doctor as Dr. Jacob Bornstein. Well, the letter says that the letter's from Harold Bornstein, Jacob's son. Harold says that he took over. Dad used to treat Trump, but Harold took over in 1980. So Donald Trump has not seen the doctor he mentions since 1980, but he still refers to the old doctor from 35 years ago as his doctor. Now, who does that? I had doctors 35 years ago as a kid. I don't even remember their names, but I don't accidentally refer to them as my current doctor. That's what Trump did. Well, I just saw another report now. I think this was on CNN. They were going and tracking down the doctor at the hospital he supposedly works at in New York. Apparently, he's registered, or whatever you call it, that he's allowed to, I guess, see patients in the hospital. I forget what you call that, but basically, doctors have to be registered so that the hospital accepts them to come in and see patients. But he's not practicing out of the hospital. He doesn't have an office there. No one can find this guy or where he works. Oh, and the psychological association or the neurological association, whatever it is they mentioned with the doctor, he hasn't been a registered member of it forever. So Trump's doctor, CNN, I wish I had the thing up right now from earlier on CNN. They would not let go of this all day, and they've basically been saying there's no evidence of Trump being healthy. Really just amazing. Just to let folks know who may have just joined on, John Aravosis, America Blog, I suspect most of you know, the editor of America Blog, Politico, working on lots of election issues, and I wanted to do a daily Facebook Live, at least weekdays, between now and the election, talking about just election analysis, what's going on. We're talking about Donald Trump's health. Anyway, pretty much wrapping up on that. It was just very funny. CNN really let him have it. But it was really amazing, actually. The Republican congressman, he was just vicious today in terms of the stuff he was saying about Hillary and her cough. She coughs. I mean, they're desperate. And it's interesting because this is the kind of desperation I think you often see in October, maybe, in the last month of the campaign. But seeing it in the third month, 3 months to go or 2.5 months to go, shows that the Trump people know they're in trouble. The final point I was going to make was, I've already said, well, what a great job Brianna Keeler did at CNN on this. But what was really interesting, I think, more generally, one of my friends on Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter also, at Aravosis is my Twitter handle. One of my friends on Twitter was saying that I think it was a Moderate Voice, was saying that they were so impressed with how the media has really stepped up and how, because the Trump campaign has lied so much and to such an unprecedented degree, even for politics as usual, that it's really started to force the media to say no more. It started to force the media to sort of get rid of its false equivalence that it used to do. How the media would always do the Hillary campaign does it too, that kind of argument, when you've got Trump doing things that are so outrageous that the media doesn't even feel the need to make a false equivalence and say, well, Hillary does it too, because Hillary isn't doing this kind of extreme. So I think it's been a good wake-up call for the media, really, that they're seeing this kind of that they're realizing that sometimes one party or one politician can so cross the line that it's worth standing up, and you're not being impartial by calling out a politician for being just ridiculous. The second topic I wanted to talk about, and I'll mention one more thing that Facebook always recommends we say. Make sure, if you're interested, there should be a follow button or something below my photo. If you click that, it should in principle let you know the next time I'm on the air doing these. Also, hitting the like button apparently helps to give this video higher rank. Facebook themselves say this in terms of, when the video goes into other people's feeds, because there will be a recording of it afterwards, people can actually see it. It'll give it a higher ranking. And if you share it with friends, the same thing. The number of shares and likes the video gets help it get seen by more people. So thank you if you do that. The next topic is WikiLeaks. Jesus Christ, this is an amazing one. AP did an investigation and confirmed, and this was interesting because it wasn't just the way the AP story was written. They didn't just write it, the Associated Press, as saying that, there's an allegation. AP did their own investigation and said this happened. WikiLeaks decided to publish a whole bunch of additional information about God knows what, and in it, among other things, they outed by name a gay Saudi man who was arrested for being gay in Saudi Arabia. They just outed him to the world by name. Mind you, in Saudi Arabia, you could be killed for being gay, among a number of other countries. They outed by name 2 rape victims. That was real nice. They outed by name 2 domestic servants in Saudi Arabia, one of which was tortured and the other of which was sexually abused. They've been outed. Now, again, with something like that, for example, you wonder, does their domestic owner or whatever the hell he is, the guy who's controlling these poor domestic servants, did this person know they went to the cops? He'll know now after the police report's been leaked. Really, this is just a particularly atrocious from WikiLeaks, but unfortunately it's not new. There was a recent story where WikiLeaks, I was going to say basically, but it's not basically, they did. WikiLeaks released private information on nearly every woman in Turkey a month ago. You can Google it. There have been lots of stories about it. I pulled up sort of an interesting story by a Turkish woman on HuffPost right before we got on here, but I know about the story anyway. Personal information on practically every woman in the country of Turkey, these guys leaked. This is how bad it is. It's what I wanted to sort of say about this. There was this whole issue from the beginning with WikiLeaks, and when you get back to Chelsea Manning, formerly Bradley Manning, military, who released a bunch of documents about Iraq War and everything else, you get back to Edward Snowden, and back then, at least, WikiLeaks was being much more careful about scrubbing the documents. Now, from what I recall, they still didn't do a good enough job. There was still a lot of, I think they risked a lot of lives with a lot of the documents that were released, but at least there was some scrubbing of the documents, and they relied on the media as well to scrub, which at least, they made sure the media scrubbed the documents. Now, they're not doing any of it. AP walks you through in the story, and I've got a post on my blog right now, americablog.com, about this. You can pull it up and look. But basically, AP went through it and showed how initially WikiLeaks was very careful about redacting information. Then they would get journalists to redact the information, anything sensitive. Then they started pulling back and back because it just took too long to redact information. They couldn't get their scoop out in time. So now they just don't really pay as much information to taking care about what information they're publishing, who they're hurting, because, and this was a great quote, because by suggesting the information needs to be redacted, it buys into the lie that freedom of information is a dangerous thing. Except that, of course, when you're outing rape victims and you're outing gay men in Saudi Arabia, it is a dangerous thing. I mean, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot if you think that. It's not even political. If you think that unfettered information could not be harmful to women or men or anybody else, for that, nobody else than women and men, but I mean to children, to victims of crime, it's ridiculous. But anyway, that's where WikiLeaks is now. Not even getting to the whole issue of the fact that Julian Assange is now for Donald Trump. Let's not even get into that, because this issue is now dealing more with, just on the apolitical side, how much they're hurting people. But anyway, that was today's revelation, and I think WikiLeaks is digging its own coffin, but it's a sign of just how insecure our information really is. Sorry, I'm pulling up Yeah, I'm sorry, my friend Christine was saying she doesn't quite understand the goal of WikiLeaks. You know, you can Google it. God knows I'm not the best person to explain it to you, but the idea was, you know, information shouldn't be kept quiet, especially government information, and that by publishing it, you're helping the whole world be more free. And certainly, initially, I'm not a big fan of publishing classified information, but I could see WikiLeaks' argument in the sense that if you do publish information that reveals a scandal, that reveals a crime, you know, things like that going on with the government, you know, human rights abuses or whatever, then yeah, you're doing classic whistleblowing, okay? You know, and a classic whistleblower is doing a good thing if they're truly blowing a whistle. But what they're doing now strikes me as anarchy. And it strikes me as anarchy with a political motive as well, at least as it involves the United States. They just want to hurt Hillary and get Donald Trump elected. Marlene writes, doesn't Assange strike you as being a bit mentally unstable? Well, I mean, he has been in the basement of the Ecuadorian embassy in London for 4 years. So, you know, I mean, a friend of mine, I don't know if he wrote this on here or mentioned it to me privately, so I won't mention him by name, but said he had, you know, met or at least known to some degree Assange before all of this, and he wasn't this nutty before. I think you've got 4 years in a basement that's playing some games on the kid's mind, the guy's mind, but I'm certainly not going to excuse him. He's also, you know, on the run from a rape charge, and 4 years of being on the run from a rape charge has got to sort of mess with you too, I would think. Again, no sympathy. But yeah, no, and Christine says, but that's assuming all info is equal, saying that, and that's exactly the point. I mean, you know, protecting the right. I ran into this issue a few years ago, several years ago now, when I did that campaign. Sorry, the sun is setting here in New York, so I'm getting you're getting nice sunset light hitting me, but it's kind of blinding me too. I did a campaign several years ago to successfully get banned this practice where you could go and buy somebody's cell phone records. And it was $89. You could go online, type in someone's cell phone number, pay $89 with your credit card, and it would print out, it would, within 2 days, send you a record of every phone call the person made in the last month. It wouldn't give you names or content of the call, but it would tell you who they called. Well, I won't get into all the details here, but one of the problems that I pointed out was this wasn't really safe for women who were victims of domestic violence or men who were victims of domestic violence. The phone call could be showing, you know, that they're calling a bunch of stores and a bunch of people within one town, for example. If this woman is, or this person is on the run from their partner, and all of a sudden all the phone calls are showing what town they're in, you know, then the partner has a better chance of following them, especially if the partner then says, oh, Peoria, Illinois, that's where her sister lives or whatever. So correct, all information is not equal. Valerie says, I think the problem is that our main media outlets are not doing their jobs. There's no investigative journalism taking place anymore. You know, I don't know. I mean, that gets us, I'll get off on a quick tangent, why not? But I want to talk about the Russian hack at the end, which this leads us into. I think media outlets are doing their jobs. I think what's hard is there's so much competition now with the media. I mean, God knows it's something I've seen with blogging. You know, 2008 was my best year ever, and then after that, it's been very hard to make money from just blogging. Advertising on the site, I'm going to be doing a big campaign that I might even announce tomorrow, finally, officially, to try to raise money to just work between now and the election going after Trump. And the ads on my blog, for example, raise at best 20% of my monthly expenses. And I'm not talking I'm renting out a warehouse. I'm saying my monthly expenses of my apartment and my electric bill, and my health care. The blog pays 20% of that. That's it. And my blog has got some pretty good influence, you know, as you guys know. The money in media is bad now. This is why you're seeing, you know, so much of the media cut back. You know, the Washington, God, I remember Chicago Tribune, where I'm from, they fired all their photographers and taught the reporters how to use iPhones. It's you know, ridiculous, really. So I have a lot of sympathy for the media. This is why they do nonstop stories about airplanes missing in the Pacific. This is why they do nonstop stories about, you know, women getting towed to sea by sharks, or I don't know, you know, whatever the hell the story is, because people want to watch it. And unfortunately, when you're doing any kind of a publication, you've got to pay attention to the number of people that are watching, because you need the people to watch, because that's how you get the advertising. And if people aren't watching, but you're doing a really good story, then you're going to do a really good story once or twice, and then you're going to go bankrupt, and you're never going to do it again. So that's that's not you got me thinking that may be worth even having a separate discussion at some point of just all of us here about what do we do with media today because of the constraints on media to make money, and how that impacts with media being sort of altruistic and just trying to do what's right and report what's right if people don't really care. But anyway, I do think there's a good investigative journalism. I think you've got a lot on the outside now. You've got BuzzFeed does great work. Huffington Post has always done great work. Certainly their core political writers. I like to think I've done some good investigative work over the years. Brian Beitler, who's flitting about everywhere. I think Brian's still at New Republic right now. Brian's amazing. So you do have a number of good, I think, investigative reporters. The problem is the media landscape is just so questionable right now in terms of its long-term survival, I think. Just to remind people, since apparently this is I had hosted a radio show once for a week, and this is what I was told you should do, and apparently for this too, is just to tell who you are in case people just jumped in. I'm John Aravosis, editor of America Blog, one of the big political blogs on the left here in the States, and this is my daily podcast between now and the election, looking at the election updates of the day. Third topic, just to jump to, well, actually, I can just see what else people wrote real quick. Yeah. Christine says, why isn't Assange looking at Trump's private emails? This conveniently takes us to our third topic, and we can still jump around on any other comments you guys leave in your questions. But the other big news today was that Russia, it appears to be Russia, has now hacked the New York Times amongst other media outlets. What gets interesting is in the last few months, we now know DNC's been hacked. A number of Democratic organizations in D.C. have been hacked. Capitol Hill's been hacked. They released the private cell phone numbers of members of Congress. You've got now the New York Times. You have, other than Capitol Hill, and I'd be curious if it was just the Democrats, if it was everybody, you've got a lot of Democrats who are being hacked here and not a lot of Republicans. You certainly don't have Republican organizations. You certainly don't have the Trump campaign being hacked. You don't have the Washington Times or the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, although let's face it, the Wall Street Journal isn't really friendly with Trump right now. So, maybe Trump would want them hacked, or whoever, the Russians would want them hacked. But it's really, I hate to say it really troubles me because that's too obvious of a thing to say, but this cyber hacking thing, the cybersecurity thing is really starting to worry me because I think as journalists or as activists, obviously, it's something you should have been worried about anyway. I tended to worry about it more with the people I work with, meaning when I was working really heavily on the whole Russia gay issue a few years ago, which was, we were trying to expose to the world and educate the world on the fact that Vladimir Putin was just horrific, and his government and his people were just horrific in their treatment of LGBT people in Russia. And I was dealing with a lot of LGBT people in Russia at the time. They were contacting me via a number of means. They were sending me copies of videos that, a very long story, but videos of abuse of LGBT people that I was able to post online. But now in retrospect, I start to wonder about whether any of those videos could have had things tagged on them, malware, bad things that could invade your computer. Well, guess what? In the last couple of weeks, there was a big article about how a number of the documents on Wikileaks have malware now, which again is bad software that's been added to the document that can do lots of things depending who added it. It can spy on you, it can do all sorts of things. Again, depending who added it. Did some kid add it? Did some foreign government add it? Did WikiLeaks itself add it? It could be it. And then you come to the question of, did WikiLeaks know? Or why didn't WikiLeaks scrub everything before it goes up there? And it's like, to make sure there weren't these hidden computer programs meant to spy on people. Well, a couple weeks ago on Twitter, New York Times reporter David Fahrenthold, who has done all the great reporting on Donald Trump's delayed contributions to charity, David had asked, if anybody sort of knew about the propriety of looking around WikiLeaks' website and downloading stuff on there. And, I talked to people in the intel field who told me they'd be very careful. This is before the story about the malware broke. They said they would be very cautious about looking around there because every intelligence agency in the world is poking around that website, and who knows what you're going to get. It's to use sort of the sexual example, you're going to the only brothel in town, and you're wondering if you're going to come away with anything bad. Well, yeah, you probably will. So, really scary in that regard. But sorry, I'm putting my glasses again so I can see what I can scroll. That's good. O'Brien, Brian asks or writes, is the system inherently vulnerable, or are all the systems vulnerable and the Russians have benefited from having to program in their little crappy computers? It depends. State actors, from people I talk to, state actors are very good. Because I was asking, what do we do as either journalists, activists, or just any of you out there, right? I mean, you don't need somebody just breaking into your computer and threatening to delete it unless you pay them or whatever. I was told it's very difficult to defend yourself against a state actor, period. It's just, that you may not be able to anyway. It's maybe even harder now because one of the other news stories that came out in the last week or two was it appears quite likely that read the Russians again, may have stolen a year 2013 version of some software the NSA can use to basically hack you. And I don't recall whether it was hacking your computer or hacking a server or hacking God knows what, but it's quite possibly the NSAs, the National Security Agencies, our big cyber spy agencies, own software that they use. Like, that's how bad, and somebody was auctioning it off. Now imagine, let alone if terrorists were to get their hands on it, but imagine, either a bunch of alt-right obnoxious kids or the Russians or anybody else. And, you start to worry about journalists, you definitely start to worry about activists. I don't feel unsafe in this country. I feel a little less safe when I'm in Europe, meaning when I'm going after the Russians and all of a sudden I'm in Europe, I get a little more worried about them. I certainly would be worried about activists and journalists in Russia, especially non-Western local activists and local journalists in places like Russia or frankly the Middle East or anywhere else. So I think, all of it kind of freaks me out. But that story today was pretty bad. Now, I don't know if I believe there's usually about a minute time delay on here, so I'll just ask if anybody has questions, or even if there's any other topic folks want to get into today. One thing I was just going to mention, although there's nothing to talk about too much with it yet, is Hillary is going to be talking on Thursday, so you definitely want to see this. She's going to be giving a speech on Thursday about the alt-right and Trump's ties to it. The alt-right, for those of you who don't know or who may have heard and not known exactly what it is a term being used for the newly nascent and rather a little too popular white supremacist far-right conservative politics. But it's a definitely white supremacist angle to it that's taken over a lot in Europe, but also we're getting some strong veins here in the States too, particularly online. Particularly now with the Donald Trump campaign, certainly earlier, but now especially with him hiring Steve Bannon, who was one of the founders and guys running Breitbart, this website here. Even Brian Stelter, I'm going to get his name wrong and I should know this, Brian Stelter from CNN, who's the media critic. Brian even basically called them a white nationalist website, Breitbart. It's that serious and that obvious that even mainstream media is referring to these guys this way. Well, this is all sort of part of the alt-right. It's this new movement, but also legitimization of not just extreme conservative views, but white supremacist conservative views. And I don't use the word white supremacist in the way that far too many on the left use it today, and it's a way that I don't like. Like they basically say everything's white supremacist. America's white supremacist. And what they mean is there's still racism and there are endemic problems with systems and everything else, and I agree with that. I think the word white supremacist makes you think of neo-Nazis. When we're talking alt-right, we are literally talking white supremacists. We are talking people who have a visceral problem with people of color. You should see, that Milo character, who's the Greek guy who spent a little too much time in England, bleaches his hair blonde, who Twitter just canceled his Twitter account that had like 350,000 followers, because this guy would basically sick his followers on people, especially black people, and would just go after them in the most racist way possible. He so thoroughly abused and had his followers abused the actress, the African-American actress who's in the new Ghostbusters remake. I forget her name. I want to say Leslie. I'm forgetting now. The really funny comedian. But anyway, she was going to quit Twitter because she had it with how the harassment she was getting in Twitter wasn't helping. And she actually announced she was quitting, and finally that got Twitter's attention, which is its own story, the fact that Twitter has dropped the ball entirely on dealing with these guys. But that's who these guys are. And what's really scary is that they've gotten to the point now where the Republican presidential campaign has basically hired these guys to be his top advisor on the campaign. That's messed up, and that's just an incredible leap forward, but it's a leap backwards in terms of these guys getting legitimacy. The political wing of Duck Dynasty, Christine says, yeah, in essence, yes. Hillary, Chris asked, what time is Hillary speaking? Hillary isn't speaking until Thursday, so you can Google it. That was the reason I was talking about the alt-right is because Hillary is going to be giving a speech on Thursday talking about basically the Trump campaign's ties to the alt-right, but as I'm reading it, I think it's this whole issue of the alt-right and Trump and just, hate, intolerance in America and everything else. Going to be on Thursday. I don't know when. My suspicion is, I don't know. It could be during the day too. It's not necessarily the night, but Google it. If the time isn't announced now, we should know by tomorrow, by Wednesday. So we'll just make sure we sort of share it. Live stream, it's got to be Chris. It'll be a Hillary speech. So it should be covered live on TV, I would think. But at the very least, Google around, because typically I'll go on Twitter and just ask people and say, where's the live stream of the Trump speech or whatever, and people will tell me. I'll definitely look and find out too and try to remember to post it on Twitter when it comes up. Yeah, Leslie Jones, Brian, that's the name of the actress who is the Ghostbusters actress who was so just abused by the alt-right on Twitter that she finally quit and finally came back because Twitter realized that they had a PR problem on their hands. I don't know if anybody else has anything. I think we sort of hit all the three topics I've got. I'm just looking to see. I don't see any other questions, but that's pretty much it. Yeah, we talked about Trump's medical and Hillary, CNN doing just a great job hitting back on the Trump people and their misinformation about Hillary, but CNN basically took the bait and said, okay, you want to talk about Trump's health or Hillary's health? Let's talk about the candidate's health overall and Mr. Trump's health as well. Second point was WikiLeaks outing a gay Saudi and two rape victims in Saudi Arabia, or two rape victims, I don't know if they're in Saudi, among others, and just how WikiLeaks, I think, is finally, WikiLeaks jumped the shark already, but I think they've finally proven it to a lot of people today. And the final thing was this Russian hack of the New York Times. I guess the final point I wanted to make about the Russian hack is just, what worries me, and I'm a Democrat. Some people could say I'm liberal. It depends, I guess, I'm certainly liberal on civil rights, on some things. I'm on defense. I'm not a great fan of the Russians, let's just put it that way. I get very worried when I see stories about like the Russian hack today. We are getting to a place with the Russians where we haven't been for 25 years. And, I grew up during the Soviet years. Sort of funny story for another time, but I wrote a letter to one of the Soviet leaders because I was pissed off about how they were treating Andrei Sakharov when I was in high school. And I got so pissed off, I wrote a letter. Just horrific what was going on. I visited the Soviet Union as well in early 1984. Fascinating trip, but a truly horrific trip. Hell, that's worth another Facebook Live. We had a little radio in each of our hotel rooms in Moscow, and the radio, it wasn't really plugged into the wall. It was attached to the wall, so you couldn't unplug it. And there was a dial, and you could turn the dial so that you could turn it low, but you couldn't turn it off. The radios were always on, and they really didn't want you turning them off, so you could only turn it to a whisper, but not off completely. That was the Soviet Union. I mean, I've got horror stories too. They arrested some friends we made and everything else. But it's beginning to feel like old times with the Russians, and that's what's scaring me with all of this. And seeing all of these hacks and how all of these hacks seem to have some larger purpose, even with the New York Times now, the fact that you're going after sort of traditional media, they're not going after media on the right, they're going after Democrats, they're clearly trying to influence our election. It feels like a game of brinksmanship or a game of one-upsmanship with Putin, where I think he's testing us. And it just, I know the administration knows this, and I suspect it's hard to figure out what to do to react. Do you just hack them back and dump a bunch of their information? Do you bring down their computers? I mean, what do? Do you increase the sanctions? But I feel like we're getting to a point where the administration is going to have to do something. I'm sure part of the counterpoint with this is they're trying to work with the Russians on Syria and a lot of other things. so that you've got to take that into account too. And this is one of the things that I think gets complicated with politics for a lot of people, is they don't realize the whole, what's the word, the intersectionality of trying to be a politician or trying to be a political operative in DC or anywhere, that you've got to think of all of these other issues you're working on with people, so that if we totally piss off the Russians, have all these new sanctions and everything else, then we can't work with them potentially on Syria and other really important issues. So I get that it's a problem, or that it's a tough problem for the Obama administration. I'm just worrying that this hacking thing is just starting to come to a head. Yeah, actually, it was like 1984, my visit to Russia, Brian. But like I said, that'll be for another day. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks, folks. I guess I can. I'm noticing we're losing a few more people too, so I won't go on. But thanks for coming. I'll figure out what tomorrow's topic is going to be, and like I said, every day, Monday to Friday at least, and we'll see about the weekends. I'm going to do these between now and the election, and we'll see if it gets us anywhere. Why not? So. Increase security with the internet. Yeah, God forbid, or God, to God's ears. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I will click this for goodbye, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. That was in honor of John McLaughlin.